More men have enjoyed White Owl than any other cigar ever made in the United States. This very night, May 9th, back in 1862, the ironclad Monitor was battling away in Hampton Roads. Indeed, that little Monitor, that cheese box on a raft, was driving a final nail into the coffin of every fleet in the world. Raymond, Graham, Swick.
Good evening. There is plenty of military news tonight, but probably the most important battle being fought at this moment is for the soul of the Vichy government. Admiral Darlan, Vichy's anti-British vice premier, left Vichy for Paris tonight after having failed to see Marshal Pétain. One report has it that the aged head of the French state is ill, but this is not confirmed, and all that is certain is that Darlan went back without having seen him and will renew his talks with Hitler's envoy in Paris, Herr Abet. At the same time, the Vichy ambassador in Washington, after a conference with Assistant Secretary Wells, announced that the United States government has agreed to send 2 shiploads of wheat each month to France so long as the Vichy policy remains unchanged. But Henriet, the ambassador, put the situation too precisely, according to Secretary Hull, who told his press conference that no final agreement on this subject has been reached. The United States, he said, may send more wheat to unoccupied France soon, but he emphasized that the deal hinges on certain considerations which he did not specify, but which it can be assumed are that Vichy, in its collaboration with Germany and Italy, does not give direct or indirect military aid in the war on Britain. The German-controlled Paris newspaper Le Temps sums up the position by saying that Vichy must choose between its friendship for the United States and collaboration with Germany. Darlan has already carried discussions with the Germans to the point of agreement on 3 lesser concessions. 1, to open the frontier between the 2 French zones for the passage of goods and food. The others making it easier for persons and the mails to cross the border. He also held out hope of getting the cost of occupation reduced by $2 million a day. He has concealed what it is that Vichy has promised to do in exchange. Darlan, it should be remembered, favors collaboration with Germany. He's the one who ordered a French convoy and French land batteries to fire on British ships, which were examining French freighters recently. And he has been trying to demonstrate to the Germans that he is as apt a man as Laval to serve their interests. But he is not the one to make the final decision. That rests with Pétain. It may be that Darlan hopes to reach a settlement with Germany which not only will cut the costs of occupation, but will bring home to France the 2 million prisoners being detained in Germany as a kind of hostage, which Hitler holds from almost every family in France. He also wants to get French industry running again, which obviously can't produce unless Germany supplies the raw materials to some extent and takes the greater part of the output. But a German spokesman in Paris, quoted today, says he doubts that the Germans will make final peace with Vichy at this time. Why should it, he asks, when things are going well? If peace were made, Germany would lose its ability to bring pressure on France. It is reported that one of the German demands is that Axis troops should have the right of transit through France and French territory, and the use of bases in North Africa, Syria, and Dakar. At this stage of the war, these concessions would have an enormous effect on Hitler's chances of success in the Mediterranean and the Battle of the Atlantic. Even the admission of German civilians to Morocco, for instance, might lead to intrigues with the population which could shatter such strength as General Weygand has left. North Africa is a vital strategic position, and here the United States government is making an attempt to bolster up Weygand. It is preparing, belatedly, to start trade between French North Africa and the United States, which would at least bring to this country some cargoes which Germany has been getting, and would be paid for with supplies which Weygand needs to maintain his military and economic strength. I should add that Ambassador Henriet said today that the food America would send to France would be distributed by the Red Cross, and that the British have agreed to pass it through the blockade. The British tonight published their shipping losses for the month of April. The total is 488,000 tons, the highest figure for any month of the war. It goes without saying that it is high because of the loss of shipping in and around Greece, and of the 43 Allied vessels sunk of 189,000 tons, a large share can be assumed to be Greek. The actual British losses are 60 ships of 293,000 tons. The figures are higher than those for February 1917, when Germany launched unrestricted submarine warfare. In that year, the losses mounted until they reached a figure in April of 852,000 tons. The British Ministry of Information issued the figures today instead of waiting until Tuesday because of the controversy which has arisen over the figures of Admiral Land of the Maritime Commission, which the British insist give a totally false picture, which, according to a statement from the White House tonight, were not compiled from official and secret information, but largely from newspaper reports. The British said that a grave danger exists that unless shipping losses are reduced, Britain's war effort and morale are likely to suffer for lack of food. No use could be made either of tanks or airplanes if food supplies fail, said the British statement. And this is the clearest British intimation in public that the British food supply is in some danger. Between 300 and 400 British bombers last night gave Hamburg and Bremen a full exposition of what such cities as Plymouth, Bristol, and Liverpool have been experiencing from Goering's Luftwaffe. It was Britain's greatest air effort of the war, and the German cities were systematically punished, in part by the new extra-destructive British bomb. Berlin and Emden had lesser range. Nearly 1,000 tons of bombs were dropped on German objectives, a figure comparable to the great German raids. The British are gratified by the rising efficiency of their defense against night bombers. So far in May, they have brought down 86 German bombers. It is not clear how many of these are victims of the mystery night interceptor planes with their eyes that see in the dark, and how many can be attributed to the bright moonlight. But the British public hopes there is a chance that the Nighthawks may put a stop to large-scale night bombing by making it too costly, just as the daylight raiding was made too costly last fall. The British were able to announce the sinking in the Far East of the German raider Hansa, the former Hamburg American passenger liner, equipped with half a dozen 5.9-inch guns and torpedo tubes. In Iraq, the signs all point to an early collapse of Rashid Ali Bey, barring one incalculable possibility that Hitler sends him military help, perhaps by air from the Greek islands, where parachutists are known to be assembled. But it looks as though the conspiracy of the Axis in Iraq had been mistimed. It is too soon to say so definitely. When the British landed their troops at Basra, they may have forced Rashid's hand. Anyhow, this may be the second Axis miscalculation, the second out of the last two master intrigues, the first being Yugoslavia. For though Yugoslavia has been crushed, it must be remembered that the Hitler plan was to take it by diplomacy, and his own ambassador failed to judge the safety of the game, and he involved his master in the vast cost of an invasion. Two pronouncements come from Moscow today, which give a little insight into the core of Soviet Union foreign policy. One is a denial by the TASS agency of reports that the Soviet Union is placing on its western frontiers, especially along the Balkans and the Caspian Sea, forces which are being withdrawn from the Far East. Still more significant is the notification to the legations of Yugoslavia, Belgium, and Norway that their status in Moscow can no longer be recognized in view of the loss of sovereignty by their countries. To withdraw recognition from three governments which are continuing in exile their fight against the Axis, is as frank and cordial a step in aid of the Axis as the diplomatic sign language is able to contrive. This puts the Yugoslavs in particular on the spot. They were so certain of the newly shown affection of the big Slav brother that many of them took refuge in the Soviet Union, and quite a few Yugoslav pilots flew their planes to Russian airports to keep them from falling into Nazi hands. So the notice today represents a sudden reversal of Soviet policy, and coming as it does after Stalin's acceptance of the premiership, it adds some credibility to the tales that Stalin is getting ready to make a big deal with the Germans. A sign that big changes are to be expected as the result of Stalin's policy is seen in Japan. The Times Advertiser, the organ of the Japanese Foreign Office, publishes a remarkable statement about peace with China. This looks like the first fruit of the Russo-Japanese Neutrality Pact, which Stalin personally negotiated. The Japanese organ advises Japan to abandon efforts to crush the Chongqing government by force. It says that the scale of hostilities in China should be reduced. China must become a partner in the co-prosperity sphere. It goes on to remark that the superiority of Japanese arms has been proved, but so has the ability of China to survive corporal punishment. And the opinion is expressed that if the Japanese armies withdraw, an advance of Chiang Kai-shek's armies would not necessarily follow. It seems reasonable to believe, it adds, that a shrinkage of the Japanese fighting fronts would lead to less and less hostility. And it concludes with the statement that the presence of the Japanese army in China should be proved to be no threat to China's political and territorial integrity. The soft-spoken words of Matsuoka's mouthpiece will have an appeal for some of the men around Chiang Kai-shek. And if Stalin should whisper to Chongqing that it is better make peace, so be threatening to withdraw Russian aid if peace isn't made, the Chinese war effort might end. It hasn't yet come to pass, but it is something to watch for.